Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Isuri Weerasinghe from Queensland University of Technology, Brisbane. Today I'm going to present about the numerical modeling of GCL overlap hydraulic performance. Here are the contents of my presentation. Starting with the word geosynthetics. Geosynthetics are polymeric products developed in a number of configurations such as geonets, geomembranes, geotextiles, etc. to serve a number of different functions in the geotechnical and geoenvironmental industry. Out of these different products, my research specifically focuses on geosynthetic clay liners used in containment barrier applications such as landfills, mines, reservoirs, ponds, and dams. GCLs mainly serve the purpose of hydraulic barriers. If you look at this example of landfill, these are designed to dump waste, and the dumped waste decomposes with time and converts into leachate. The leachate submerges into the underlying soil, contaminating the ground and groundwater aquifers. To prevent this, a liner is designed at the bottom of these containment facilities, and the GCL acts as a main hydraulic barrier, obstructing the flow of liquid into the underlying ground. Conventionally, compacted clay liners were used, and during the last 1 or 2 decades, GCLs have substituted compacted clay liners, as the 5 to 10 millimeter thick GCL provides the same hydraulic protection as 1 meter of compacted clay. This reduces the cost incurred on scarce geomaterial and also saves a lot of space in the facility. So this is a cross-section of a GCL, where you can see the sodium bentonite sandwiched between the non-woven geotextile and the woven geotextile. And today, the hydraulic conductivity of the GCLs have improved quite a lot to 1 into 10 to the power minus 10 to minus 12 meters per second. Here is an example of a containment facility bottom liner in an actual construction site. So these GCLs are typically manufactured as panels of dimension 35 meters to 5 meters length and width. And as you can see, the panels are overlaid, As you can see, the panels are laid overlapping one after the other in such a way that it builds up to a continuous liner. These GCLs are then overlain with a geomembrane and then a specified thickness of gravel or soil. The industry faces challenges in maintaining the continuous liner system in the long run, detecting liner leakages and overlap separations in the field. These result in site operation costs to improve leakage detection systems and remediation and rehabilitation of such liner failures. So we looked at why these GCL panels struggle to maintain the continuity of the liner system when it's laid in the field, and how we could overcome this challenge in actual field conditions. A number of model scale and element scale testing have been developed by a number of researchers during the past few decades to measure the liquid flow passing through these GCL overlaps. Initially, Esternal and Daniel in 1997 developed this steel tank where they could actually replicate a full-length overlap seam inside the box. However, due to the low confinement capacity and the time period consumed, it was not identified that feasible. So researchers moved on to using the permeameter cell test apparatus, where the specimen size was only a 100 millimeter diameter circular sample, where you could not actually replicate a full-length GCL overlap. So it wasn't identified that feasible either. Kendall et al. In 2001 developed a numerical model to observe the hydraulic flow through a common circular defect in a GCL. And then Matthew et al. In 2004 tried to develop to simulate the liquid flow passing through a GCL overlap in a flow box apparatus using the USOL software. However, further research wasn't conducted and none of these models were validated. So the limited numerical modeling on the GCL overlap hydraulic performance brought us to research further on this specific research topic. So the objective of this research was to develop a numerical modeling technique to replicate the GCL overlap lab conditions as an alternative to long-term laboratory testing. Geofabrics Australasia provided the material and the laboratory facilities, and the GeoSlope CW software was used for the numerical modeling work. As I mentioned earlier, these panels come in 35 meter to 5 meter length with dimensions, and on either sides of these panels, you could see additional supplemental bentonite impregnated into the panel in the overlapping areas. So if we were to experiment a single layer GCL, we would sample them from the middle of the panel, and if we were to experiment on the overlaps, we usually sample the specimen in such a way that the overlaps comprise of the additional supplemental bentonite. So in these most commonly used flow box apparatuses, we usually measure the liquid flow passing through the overlap using the normalized hydraulic flux. And we conducted 3 tests in this specific research study: a single layer GCL test, a 300 millimeter overlap, and a 150 millimeter overlap. For the single layer GCL, we conducted a flow box test, and we obtained the hydraulic flux and the thickness of the material and calculated the hydraulic conductivity passing through the single GCL. We developed a numerical model to replicate the flow box test using this similar boundary conditions, and we use the hydraulic conductivity of the single GCL as the input material parameter for this model. The hydraulic flux obtained by the FE model was exactly the same as the hydraulic flux obtained from the flow box apparatus, validating the fact that this model could be used for further work. We improved this model for a 300 millimeter overlap and a 150 millimeter overlap, and the hydraulic conductivity of the single GCL was still assigned as the material property of the GCLs. The supplemental bentonite impregnated in the overlapping area was introduced as an interface property between the 2 GCL layers. So these are the results obtained from the 3 overlap tests. And as you can see in the results, you could actually observe the increase in flow at the overlap in this numerical model. So we observed from the results that lower the overlap length, the higher the conductivity was. And it was interesting to find out that the flux passing through the 150 millimeter overlap was even higher than the flux through the single layer due to the higher horizontal flow through the interface in the overlap. The optimum hydraulic conductivity expected from the liner system was hence not achieved by the 150 millimeter overlap. However, and further to that, it was confirmed that the conclusions obtained in literature that the 300 millimeter overlap length is optimal was confirmed again by this research. So with this research study, we concluded that the liquid flow through the 150 millimeter overlap was higher than the 300 millimeter overlap, and therefore the optimum overlap length should be maintained at least 300 millimeters. With the development of the FE model, we observed the ability of the FE model to replicate the changes in the GCL overlap length, capturing the variation of liquid flow with the variation of GCL overlap. And further to that, we endorse the fact that the numerical model, if further improved, could be an effective alternative in modeling the challenging long-term GCL overlap testing. And we recommend that this analysis could be further broadened by modeling a series of overlap lengths to observe how the interface hydraulic performance is varied. It could also be modified to analyze different experimental conditions such as the hydraulic head and the overburden confining stress to observe its effect on different field conditions. One challenge we faced in developing this model was the variation of thickness that we had to incorporate in each specific test. So we suggest that the manufacturers develop a relationship of their GCL thickness to suit the different field conditions, or either use a normalized hydraulic conductivity using a specific thickness as the material parameter when modeling the laboratory tests in the software. So with this, here are the references used for this research work. And with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.